your introduction, and we're going to continue our program. I hope you will pass it. You will challenge them with more questions, and also today is a time that both candidates they're going to reveal who they are, and also we are going to who's going to be the leader. We're going to take full observation. Who's going to lead us about job, about affordable housing, and so many of things that concern us in our life. So before I start, as usual, I have to thank the Eritrean Community Association for their self-help, especially for preparing the food what we are enjoying today. And also, I like to mention our sponsors for this event, CIU Local 925 Labor Union, Multimedia Resource, and New District for Equity and Liability Alliance, and also the Seattle Neighborhood Greenway. And we appreciate and we look forward in the future to work with them. Without any further ado, because I have a time restraint, I'm going to introduce our 4 young from University of Washington. Here they are, because we thought the future belongs to them. We want to give them a chance to participate in that. So we can start.
Hi, I'm Aiden, and I'm a CEP major.
Evangeline Taylor, Comparative History and Ideas major. Emma Bennett, a Comparative History and Ideas major as well.
Tyler Simpson, Community Environment.
Thank you. I want to start just 1 minute introduction. Tell us why you are running for mayor. Cary.
It is great to be here. Thank you so much for the delicious lunch and for being here at this forum with your great questions and great ideas, because civic engagement and working in coalition is what our city is about. I'm Cary Moon. I'm running for mayor of Seattle because I believe in the potential of all of us together. We know we can be a city that is welcoming, that is inclusive, that is diverse, that is creative, and that is committed to shared prosperity, because we have so much to work with in this city. I launched my campaign not just talking about problems and challenges, but putting forward a platform of bold solutions, because we are racing towards a cliff in this city. We are becoming a city of haves and have-nots. We need to get on track to be the city where everybody feels they belong. And I would like to be that leader. I'm looking forward to this conversation today and to working together with you long term, because this is going to take all of us. Thank you so much.
Hi, I'm stand up so people in the back can see me. I'm Jenny Durkan, and I'm running for mayor. Hi, kids up there. I'm so honored to be here again back at CIRCC. I said to Vilma Valoria that it was my favorite forum, don't tell everyone else, before the primary, largely because I got to have the youth grill us. I hope today we can talk about affordability, because Seattle really is not an affordable city anymore, and I've got some plans to address that. Talk about helping our youth. I promise that every Seattle Public School graduate will get 2 years free tuition at community college. And also talk about how we're going to protect immigrant and refugee families. The day Trump's travel ban was announced, I drove to SeaTac Airport, and working with some other lawyers, managed to get one of the first court orders to stop them from having illegal deportations. I look forward to answering your questions today. I love this city and would love to be your mayor. Thank you so very much.
Thank you. I forgot to mention the most important timekeeper Gate for his continuous support, so I'll be nice with you. All right. You can ask the first question to Jenny.
Thank you.
2 minutes, yeah.
I'm going to start with housing. Due to the continued gentrification in Seattle, with displacement minorities, especially the Rainier Valley, the city core is becoming whiter. How can you ensure that housing developers and the market will work to anchor neighborhood and community-specific residents who historically have lived in these neighborhoods?
such a great question, and I think it goes to the heart of what we are in Seattle. You know, I was born here, my mother was born and raised here, and we were fortunate, but this city has changed so rapidly. We've always been a city that has welcomed immigrants and refugees, but it has become such an affordable city right now that people are getting displaced at such a fast pace. People can't afford to be in Seattle. They can't find a house to rent, let alone to buy, and people who've lived here for a very long time are being pushed out by rising costs. And it's made worse because the job prospects and employment prospects have not kept up, and people can't have an affordable wage. So I don't think we can leave it just to market forces. I think we as a people and the government together have to make sure some things happen. One, we need more affordable housing as quickly as we can build it. That means building more public housing, and it means building other housing as well. And we have to do that as quickly as possible. Second, it means keeping the affordable housing we have. I want to do that through a variety of mechanisms, but one of them is to go to those landlords that are providing affordable places and say to them, we'll keep your property taxes low if you keep the rents low. But if you raise the rents, your property taxes go up and you have to pay it back. Because there's just too many. As property taxes go up, rents go up and up and up, and people can't afford to stay in their homes. I've also proposed a rent voucher program because it's going to take us too long to build enough housing. So I want to put rent vouchers in the hands of people who need them right away. In the first weeks of being mayor, I will clear the waiting list at the Seattle Housing Authority to make sure people can actually stay in homes. I think we also have to have economic empowerment, which means better jobs in this neighborhood and in these communities. Because without that, we won't be able to do it. Thank you very much.
So this issue is really what galvanized me to get in this race. I'm not new to this issue. I've been working on this issue for years. I want to tell a story at the Filipino Community Center a couple weeks ago. I met a hairdresser who's had her house for 40 years. Her property taxes have increased so steeply, she can't afford to move and she can't afford to stay. We need to get ahead of this problem. So we need to solve it at 3 levels. We need to stop the speculation that is part of driving up our housing prices so quickly. Our housing prices are rising twice as fast as any other city in the US. They are already out of range for most people who live and work in this city. Something is fishy here, something's wrong in our housing market. We've got to understand the degree to which speculation and outside investors are using our homes as investments, not as a place to live in. We've got to understand this dynamic and put the right disincentive in to stop it. We also have to build a lot more affordable housing, get the Housing Trust Fund back up to the level where it should be, get more money in the pipeline to build nonprofit housing, and also look at the 100+ parcels of surplus public-owned land in our city that is lying there idle, not being used for housing, not being used for homeless shelters. We need to get that land back into productive use to provide housing that we so desperately need. We also need to look at how do we keep home ownership in communities of color. This means we have to make it easier to build backyard cottages, duplexes, and mother-in-laws in your houses, because that way you can get a revenue stream, income from owning a house, keep ownership of your house, and be able to provide more housing for people at other income levels who live in our city. I think there's some great models. We've got to look at El Centro de la Raza, which did a great project to build community-based housing. Look at SEOC project that's coming online. Look at the Liberty Bank project and Africa Town. There's all these models to do true community-based planning for housing that supports and is welcoming and affordable to the community.
All right, I have a question for you guys and then a follow-up question. So to start, what do you think about the direction the city has taken on mandatory housing affordability, also known as inclusionary zoning? Do you think this mandatory housing affordability can be sufficient in preventing displacement in the future? And then to follow up, how would the city work with CIRCC, communities of immigrants, refugees, or coalition of immigrants, refugees, and communities of color, to preserve the diversity that Seattle still has and minimize displacement?
I'm glad this is a follow-up because keep going. No, HALA is not enough. HALA was a deal cut in a room where not everybody was at the table, specifically small business, specifically communities of color. And it was a very top-down approach of how do we blanket the whole city with upzones so that developers can build more development without actually talking to communities about what they need. So we need to look at the mandatory housing affordability as one tool in the toolbox. It's going to work in some neighborhoods, but in other neighborhoods, it's going to make displacement and gentrification worse. So we've got to sit down together with communities, look at the housing economics of that particular community, identify other tools in the toolkit that might be more useful to your community so that we can build equity into how we build new housing. We need to make sure we're looking at how to build housing that's affordable to and welcoming to the folks from the community, from the neighborhood. We've got to make sure we're building developments that have affordable commercial spaces and space for social services and civic groups like yours. We've got to do this together with the city, the developer, and the community, and then the city can stay a partner by enforcing community benefit agreements. Whatever deal we made with the developer, the city can stay at the table and enforce that. The city can help get access to funding for the nonprofit housing development that needs to happen. I think we need to do a much better job of local place-based planning focused on local ownership, local communities visioning what future they want, and making sure we are building housing that is welcoming to and affordable to folks from the community, not outsiders, trying to attract outsiders at higher incomes to come into the community. This is what city planning is, it's what I know how to do, and it's what we need to do a much better job of all throughout the South End.
So again, just such a great question. Seattle has become unaffordable largely because so many people have moved here. We've grown by almost 100,000 people in some short years. And as a result, people are getting pushed out and things are just too expensive. We had to find some way, I believe, to make developers pay for the growth. And the agreement that developers, both nonprofit developers and the city reached was the thing called HALA, the Housing Affordability and Livability Agenda. We have to have that money if we want to make a dent in getting more affordable housing. But it's not enough. We have to do more than that. And we can't also just focus on affordability. We have to focus on a few other things. First is the L in HALA, livability. To make sure as communities grow and get denser, they're actually livable for the families that live there, for the people that live there, and to commute in and out. So that means better transit, better walking, better sidewalks. It also means having projects that where seniors can live near the community center. Like at the Ethiopian Community Center, what's planned there. I know there's some plans for here. You look at El Centro de la Raza. So it is not just all about density and getting taller. It's about how we grow. Making sure we keep communities together. You know, we're seeing more and more it's harder for the elders in our society. We have to really focus on how is our city livable for our elders and particularly for those who may not speak English as a first language. We have to have better ways to get around, more mobility, and really come together as a community. So we're going to need more affordable housing almost immediately, but it won't come quickly enough, which is another reason why I proposed rent vouchers. Some people just can't wait for more housing to be built. They need help to stay where they are now.
Now we'll move into tax reform. Middle and lower income households in Washington state give to 17% of their income in taxes, while the average rate among the very wealthiest households is less than 3%. Washington has the most inequitable tax system in the nation. With that, we have two questions. What can be done on the city level to reduce the tax load on low and middle income families? How would we work with CIRCC to ensure that Seattle leads the way in cleaning up Washington State's upside-down tax code?
So the tax structure in Washington State and Seattle is unfair. People call it regressive. Yes, it's regressive, but that's code for unfair. Because the people who can afford to pay less pays more. And the people who can afford to pay more pay less proportion. So we have to change that. We pushed through the income tax in the city of Seattle. We'll see if that fares well in the courts. If it does, it will give us a great tool. I've been the one candidate throughout this campaign who has said that if the income tax is upheld in Seattle, I will take that money and pay down those taxes that are unfair. Because right now, people pay too much in sales tax and property tax and small businesses. If you have a small business, the B&O tax is very unfair because it charges people on the total amount they make rather than the profit. So if we are successful in getting an income tax, if our income tax is upheld, I will use it to reduce those regressive taxes. But we have to do more. We have to keep putting pressure on Olympia to make it statewide and have things like a capital gains tax to give us more flexibility to charge a real estate excise tax so that people that buy and sell luxury properties pay more. We have to shift the tax burden from the people who earn the less, who are carrying too much of it, to the people who have more. And so we have to look at the whole system of taxes and try to make them more fair. We can't wait for Olympia though, so I have proposed some specific things to help people who are low income. For example, like I said, have a property tax break, not just for landlords who are providing affordable housing, but for seniors. Too many people on fixed income can't afford to stay where they are. So I want to reduce the property tax there. I also want to use some of the money that is built up in the Sound Transit Fund and other funds to improve our bus service and mobility in neighborhoods. So we have to look both at the local taxes we can have and keep putting pressure on Olympia to be more fair.
In our city, we always vote yes for taxes. We voted yes to 7 tax increases in the past 7 years. But people have had enough. With the rise in property values and those 7 tax increases, low and middle income people are really struggling. I think we've hit the wall for regressive taxes in our city. But you know, in the rest of the state where we have to do this work, we need to change the debate. Because Seattle, we hear the word taxes and we're like, yep, that's part of being in society. In the rest of the state, we've got to have a different debate around investing in the infrastructure we all need to thrive. Because if you start this question talking about, don't you want your kids to have great access to a great education and affordable college? Don't you want safe streets? Don't you want really reliable public safety? Don't you want transit? And don't you want to be able to thrive in the city, everyone be able to thrive in our whole state? If you start the conversation there and talk about what we can get by investing collectively in the next generation, you get people in a frame of mind where they're willing to consider something new. So that's why tax reform in our state has always been called the third rail, that no one likes to talk about it. We need to change the debate, and then we can pursue a capital gains tax on wealthy folks, because they are not paying any taxes in our state on this wealth that they are getting, not from work, but from simply having money. So we have to tax that. We've got to look at state and inheritance taxes. We've got to look at a more steeply progressive B&O tax. We've got to look at a real estate excise tax on luxury properties above a certain level. We know what the sources are. We have to build the public will with partners in Olympia to be able to get to that point. So yes, we have a great start here in Seattle on a higher earners income tax, but let's take that to the state with a whole suite of tax reforms, starting with a positive conversation about our shared future.
On jobs, the staggering problems of chronic unemployment among minorities are high. If you are elected, how would you improve job training programs and expand hiring opportunities in city government positions for people of color, immigrants, and refugees?
So our economy, we all see the results. It's deeply out of balance. We're creating tremendous wealth in Seattle. All the benefits are going to the very few at the top. And other folks are falling further and further behind, slipping beneath the surface. And we need to attack this head on. We've had sort of a passive attitude in our city about how to build an economy that works for everybody, thinking if we just generate wealth up here, somehow it will trickle down. We know that doesn't work. So that means we have to invest in small and local business, because local businesses that are owned in community circulate wealth back into community and build good, lasting jobs in community. We've got to look at job training programs. We have 30,000 job openings at Amazon, and how many young kids graduating every year from Seattle Public Schools who don't have access to those jobs. So we have to build a better pipeline of the training people in the skills they need for the jobs we do have available. We also have a lot of jobs in the trades, in construction and maritime and manufacturing that we are not preparing young people for. So we've got to go back to the days of when we used to have shop class and give young people a taste of here's what it's like to build something. Have pre-apprenticeship programs so young people understand the whole range of jobs there are out there in the world besides the service sector jobs that they have access to already. We've got to do a much better job with Seattle Public Schools and educators and unions and industry to build that pipeline back. We used to have that pipeline in our country. We have dismantled it. We can build it back in this city because the way to build shared prosperity is local ownership and having a broad and diverse economy and having pathways to entrepreneurship and good jobs for low-income kids and kids from communities of color. We know what we need to do. We just need our city and our economic development department to focus on that side of economic development, not the big corporations.
There's probably no more important thing for us to do as a community to solve the problem of affordability than having real economic opportunity, real economic empowerment. And so in this campaign, I have made specific proposals to try to do that, particularly for immigrant and refugee communities and communities of color, because we all know that's who's been left behind in this economic boom time that Seattle's had. It has not been shared prosperity. So specific things, for example, that I have proposed is our small businesses in this city employ almost 4 to 5 times more than Amazon employs. Think of that. But our small businesses get left behind. So I want to have a number of things to do. I want to have new small businesses have a 3-year period where they don't pay any B&O tax. Give those small businesses a chance to start up without having that crushing burden of taxes on the gross. I also want to make sure that we keep affordable space for our small businesses. It's just not rents that are going up for apartments and houses. Businesses can't afford to stay where they are. I've talked a lot about having apprenticeship programs. Part of the problem is our kids aren't getting ready for the jobs we have. And so when they get out of school, they're not getting the jobs and the opportunity. I want to make sure that we have apprenticeship programs and opportunities built into the schools and that we really close that opportunity gap so that we don't have a school-to-prison pipeline, we have a school-to-empowerment pipeline. That's another reason I've had this promise of 2 years free tuition at Seattle Community College for any kid that graduates from a Seattle public school. We are bringing shop classes back. Rainier Beach just opened a shop class. We'll work with labor to make sure that any kid who graduates from Seattle, I want them to be able to run the buildings that are in the new tall buildings or build the buildings. Thank you.
All right. Currently, some police officers abuse their power and position when interacting with minorities, often around resistance to arrest and/or failure to comply. This has led to increased and inappropriate arrests of minorities at a disproportionate rate. How would you change the law or police department policies and practices?
So the issue of police reform is one that I have worked on in this town literally for decades. And when I was President Obama's U.S. attorney, I saw video after video after video of police abusing usually young men of color. And then John T. Williams was shot down in the street. I worked with community groups to reform the police department and insisted on a couple of things. Number one, that we have a federal judge who was in charge so that the police department could not just check boxes and say they were done. I also had to fight hard for that because the city of Seattle pushed back. The mayor at the time just wanted an agreement that wasn't enforceable. The second thing that I fought for was to include bias policing because part of the problem was Seattle Police Department was not keeping the data that we could use to prove that there was bias policing. So one of the reasons we actually have data now that shows that people of color and immigrants and refugees are getting stopped more often is because that consent decree insisted on it. And so if I'm elected mayor, I will tell you, we will continue on police reform. It will be one of my top priorities. The judge will decide in the next week whether the police department has reached what's called full and effective compliance. That means they've hit the baseline. They've changed their training. They're now based on de-escalation. But we've got 2 years to keep their feet to the fire. We've gotten a lot better, but the death of Charlene Lyles shows we have to keep reforming. We have to make sure that our police department is one that's based on de-escalation, trust, and that they're guardians, not warriors. It's why I support Initiative 940. I think that it has to be a statewide level at which every police department, whether in Seattle, Renton, Everett, or wherever, treats community with respect.
I was talking to one of my staff members yesterday about this very issue. She's an African-American woman who grew up in Seattle, and she told me, in her own words, what the talk was. When her parents sat her down and said, at age 10, this is what it's like in this city, and this is what you have to watch out for if you ever get tangled up with the police. And I'm still shaking from the way she described it and the fear it put in her heart of, she's a great person, she's a part of society like all of us, but to know that the police are treating her as subhuman and that she had to be careful to be safe is simply wrong, wrong, wrong. We know this, we are working on this problem, but we need to go a lot deeper. First, we need to listen to the Community Police Commission, keep them at the center of this. They are the organization that's tasked with oversight, with being the eyes and ears for community, and with telling us when we've done enough and pointing out when we haven't. We've got to keep going with training. The alternatives to use of force, yes. The de-escalation techniques, yes. The how to help people in crisis, yes. But we have to go much more deeply into anti-racist training. And this is not just one-time check off the box. This is deep, transformative change. Because in our city of Seattle, where white folks think everything's fine and we're fair because we don't have the KKK here like in some other cities, that's not the case. We have deep racial bias in our hearts, and we have to keep working at getting rid of it through our police force and everywhere throughout our city. This is an ongoing training. We also need to make sure we're staffing the police so they have time to be in community, building relationships, building trust. But for that really to work, we've got to change the culture of how we manage in the police department, making sure from the precinct level on up that we are aiming to be the most effective, most skillful, least violent police force in the nation, and hire the folks who want to do that job in community.
If elected mayor, would you support changing the state law on deadly force so that law enforcement could be prosecuted for the unnecessary, reckless, and negligent use of deadly force?
Yes. I have met with Andre Taylor and Gabe, the campaign manager, several times. I was the first candidate to sign this and give money and show endorsement for it, because it's absolutely essential that we change this law at the state level. The other parts of it beyond changing the standard are also equally important. We've got to do investigations in the way they describe. We've got to ensure that police force is providing first aid in the way they prescribe. This is the right solution, and it needs to happen at the state level. And I encourage everybody here who hasn't signed the petition, who hasn't given money, to please do so, because this is one of the most fundamental pieces of the change that we need. And once that's in place, we can continue with all the reforms that I've described at the city level and really achieve a city that is the least violent, most skillful police force in the nation. And I want to talk a little bit more about how that change happens, because, top down, knocking heads together, you do this or you must do this, is not the right way to lead change inside an organization. Inside the organization, you have to build the will for change in people's hearts. And so that means setting a positive vision, inviting the police force to be part of the solution, being firm and saying, no, that's, what you're asking for over here is not going to be allowed, but inviting them to be part of the solution, because that's how you do lasting, permanent change. And that's the part where we're most falling short in our city right now, is police officers feel vilified. They feel like they've been blamed for society's larger problems, for, basically they're following orders. and the orders are coming from the top. So we've got to change the direction for how we want to do policing in the city. We've got to hire skilled management at all levels. We've got to make sure that we are building momentum for this change throughout the organization and not just imposing it from the top.
I would say if we're looking out at the next elections, this issue is one of the most important. I've actually been working to try to get that law changed and helping people who are trying to get it changed by going through Olympia. And every year, the promise would be made, we think we've got it this year. We can change the law so it's not impossible to keep police accountable. And every year it hasn't worked. And so that's why we need a citizens initiative, to tell the legislature in Olympia, we really mean it. We know that you have to change how police is. Now, I can tell you on this issue, for me, it's really personal. I sat with the family of John T. Williams after the King County prosecutor had to tell them that they could not prosecute the officer that killed John T. Williams because the law made it impossible. And after they looked at the federal law, which also made it impossible. We have to be able to keep police officers accountable. Most of them work really hard, they're protecting our safety, but when a police officer steps out of bounds, they need to be able to be held accountable. And the law as it exists today requires you to prove not just intent, but malice and bad faith. You really can't meet that burden. So I would carry on this one. If you haven't signed the initiative, please do, please support it, and push for that kind of change. But more importantly, every day in this city, we need to keep making sure that police and the communities they serve are better connected. We need to return to the model where there's actually community policing, and communities know their officers. They get out of their cars, they walk, and they talk to small businesses. They know the kids that are in the neighborhoods and know how to say hi to them. That's how Seattle used to be on a modeling, and then we grew too fast and didn't have the resources. And it's particularly necessary for communities of immigrants and refugees because you come from countries where you can't trust authority. And so we have a special burden here to show that you can trust the police.
Thank you. We always encourage the public to participate. At this time, I have received a lot of index card questions, but I'm going to limit only for 2 because both candidates have to go to do their candidacy work. So I'm going to read the first one. Will you support a policy that gives Seattle residents who are displaced by development of legal right to move back into the developed building and at the same rent they were paying before displacement?
This is if I understand your question, it's whether people who are displaced from the Seattle Housing Authority during the remodels have a right to go back. Absolutely, I support it, and I was just talking to Seattle Housing Authority about this very thing a few weeks ago to make sure that those people who are pushed out, particularly as they're redeveloping Yesler Terrace and other places, have the first right of refusal to come back. So important. So many families have really built a home and a community there. So I think it's not only the right thing to do, I think it's the smart thing to do for our city. Because if you've been up to Yesler Terraces and been to these new buildings and been to the community center there, it's fantastic. It's going to be really, I think, the heart and anchor of that part. And the families who lived there before, I think, absolutely have to have a right to come back. The other thing I think that's happening there, but that's going to take community together, is building that connection between Yesler Terrace and the schools in the area. There's some great projects on that front going online to make sure that as the kids are moving from the Yesler Terrace homes to the school, there's lots of support for them. Sometimes these kids are coming from very traumatic incidents and don't speak English, and so having that ability to have the support services there. But you see it up and down. We saw, when they redid Holly, when they built Rainier Vista, sometimes the people who were displaced weren't able to come back. And government should never be part of the power that is displacing communities. We need to be pulling communities back together and raising them up. So I absolutely would support that kind of policy.
I too would support that policy. It is a great proposal. I know SHA thinks they're doing a good job of this, but clearly folks from the community don't believe they're doing a good job of this. So we need to get in there and understand what more they should be doing to make sure they're finding the folks who are displaced, inviting them to come back, and making it easier for them to move back. I want to talk a little bit more, though, about Yesler Terrace, because I think there's a chance to do better there. We, as you know, used to have 561 units of deeply affordable housing at Yesler Terrace. They're replacing those 561 units, but also adding 1,200 more workforce housing and selling off land to build 3,200 units of market rate housing. And we need to relook at the math on that. We have sold 4 of the 7 total parcels that we plan to sell. Can we hold back selling the last 3, 1 or 2 of the last 3 at least, and keep that in SHA ownership to build more deeply affordable housing? Because the housing market has changed so much, maybe we could get more money for those parcels we are still selling off and retain the last 1 or 2. Because we absolutely have a housing affordability crisis in this city. We need to try every single strategy we can to build more public housing and deeply affordable nonprofit housing. So I would absolutely push on SHA to relook at the numbers and see if we can figure out a different deal, keep more of that housing in deeply affordable housing so that we can provide more spaces for people to come back into that great community that's being built.
Thank you. The second question is a question that really goes to our hearts, especially navigating with a bike and driving. And this is how will it help the city expand walking and biking infrastructure, especially in underserved neighborhoods.
So we've all noticed how bad traffic has gotten, especially in the last 6 months. Anywhere you try to go in the city from 3 p.m. to 8 p.m., it's incredibly frustrating to move around. And the way we solve this problem, because we have limited street space, is to really focus on excellent transit service, so you can spend less time commuting and more time home with your families. We need a full network of protected bike lanes, because right now we have a chunk of bike lane here and a chunk of bike lane there, but if you can't get to your final destination knowing you're going to be safe, you're not going to take your bike. So we need to invest in biking, we need to invest in walking so that more people feel safe walking, and the intersections are designed for pedestrian safety, not for car convenience. If we invest in biking, walking, and transit, we can invite more and more people to use those modes of travel and leave space on the streets for people who need to drive, whether you're doing deliveries or you have a disability, or whether you're making 8 trips together or ferrying kids. Sometimes you need to drive, but we need to invest in the other modes first, or we will never get ahead of the traffic congestion that we're in now. And I think the bike share program has been really fascinating because we made it a lot simpler with this second round. It's a lot easier to use the Lime bikes and the spin bikes than it was the old bikes. And the bike ridership is really increasing in the South End. So I think we need to keep focused on that. How do we make biking more inviting to low-income kids in communities of color, get them access to bikes, get them access to training, make sure we have facilities that work, because we can move a lot more people if we invest in those modes than if we continue to expect people to bring their car with them everywhere they go.
Thank you for that question. Anyone who either takes the bus into town or drives into town knows traffic is awful. And Cary and I want to make very clear that probably in the next 4 years, traffic is going to get even worse, and it won't be the mayor's fault, right? Seriously though, they're starting some new mega projects in downtown Seattle. They're going to start a convention center project, and to do that, they have to close the bus tunnel. So all the buses that used to go in the tunnel will be coming onto the city streets. In addition, First Avenue will be closed largely because they're going to build the new trolley line. And then there's going to be other construction of other buildings. So Seattle will be almost impassable in the downtown core. It's going to be challenging, but I think it gives us some real opportunities. First thing we have to do is improve transit more. That means more and regular buses. I mean, there's no bus line, a well-used bus line in Seattle that 1 or 2 or 3 sometimes buses go by and they're all full. So we need more regular bus routes. We have to speed up Sound Transit 3 so it comes online quicker and do the infill stations. We have to make biking safer and we have to make walking safer. I've also said that I will try to work with the companies like Amazon, and if I'm mayor, I'll do it, to maybe stagger work hours and have people work from home. So on Monday, 20% of the people stay home, and on Tuesday, 20% of the people stay home. So we literally have fewer people coming in. But at the end of the day, what we need to do is get people out of their single occupancy vehicles. We just have too many cars for the road. And if we get some of those cars off the road, it's going to be easier for us on buses to get through. So we've got to improve transit, get people out of their cars, and try to get fewer people coming into town. But we have to make mobility easier for people.
Last but not least, it is yes or no question. If you are will you commit meeting with CIRCC with 90 days of your election? Yes or no? Yes. Yes.
But only if they'll meet with us.
We will bother it. Now it's going to be 2 minutes concrete. Just give us your last speech on your concrete remarks.
Thank you so much for taking the time to be here. It's clear this election means a lot to so many people. I think one of the things that has been so inspiring to me through this election is how engaged people are, how much they care. You know, it has been a dark and difficult time in our country since the election of Donald Trump, at least for me. Nothing good is coming out of Washington, D.C. And it seems every week he thinks of a way to be more cruel and more hard on communities that are already having a hard time. You know, it started with a travel ban, and as I said, I drove right to SeaTac Airport and worked with civil rights groups to get the first court order here in Seattle to stop that travel ban from illegally deporting someone to Dubai. And I will tell you that when the news of hearing that that plane had to come back and let that man off to continue on his juries was one of the things I'm most proud of in my career as a lawyer. But we have to do more than that. Since no leadership is coming from Olympia, it's got to come from right here. And we've got real challenges: affordability, transportation, homelessness. But I think we can fix these. And if we do it right here, I think we can show the country how you can lead on the issues that matter to people. That you really can pull people together. You can empower them. You can give them real opportunity, not just words. And so if I'm your mayor, I not only will come and meet with you, but I will expect you to be helping me all 4 years to get to where I go. Because we can only do it together as a city. If we really want to make Seattle a home welcoming for all people, it's only going to happen if we all roll up our sleeves, if we work together, if we reject the hate coming out of Washington and show that the love coming out of this Washington is stronger.
So I want to tell you what happened this week to me. I spent a good chunk of Sunday afternoon meeting with leaders from advocacy and service organizations led by communities of color, led by people of color. Then I went to the Seattle Times editorial board meeting, which was the pinnacle of entitlement, white superiority, and hostility. Just demanding. What will I do to protect the status quo? What will I do to basically make the vision of Seattle that they care about? And then I went straight from there to the group that's the Black clergy. I can't remember exactly the name, but it's all the leaders of Black clergy in our city. And those 3 meetings juxtaposed against each other infuriated me. I was in such a rage because the skill, the intelligence, the solutions, the commitment to a greater city in the first and third meeting compared to the exclusive, hostile power protection of the central meeting really made me so determined to get to the mayor's office and change who has power in this city, change who gets listened to, build a city that is truly inclusive, that truly listens to you, that truly shapes solutions together with you. It is time in our city for this change to happen. Power has been held in too few hands for too long, and we are at the moment now where we all feel it. We all feel that what we're doing is not working. We need better solutions. I have worked in this city for 20 years because cities are my passion and my profession. I care deeply about this city. If you know anything about my activism, you know I am not afraid to say difficult things to powerful people. That is what we need in the mayor's office to make this change we need now. I am ready to implement bold solutions. I'm ready to bring transparency and ethics back to the mayor's office and establish a city team that really cares about implementing solutions together with you. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Candidate Jenny Durkan and Candidate Cary, we appreciate for coming here to explain your policy and work with us. And we are looking forward to work as well. So the last one is we have scientific ballot boxes over there, so I want you to cast your vote. Thank you so much. We appreciate it.
Thank you, everybody.